All right, mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Welcome to the live stream. We're actually getting started a little late. I had it down for 6:30, but it was actually 6 that I scheduled it. So we're off a little bit, but we're gonna work it out. So if you're tuning in on the live stream, I definitely want to welcome to you. We're talking about guns. So this live stream is about gun talk. All right. So we're not getting into any school shootings or anything like that, but there are a few cases in the news that all involve guns. And before I get into it, because these are tragic stories, so I definitely want to proceed with all due respect to the victims involved. But we're talking about the Alec Baldwin case. So Alec Baldwin's case was recently dismissed. If you heard about the charges against him out of New Mexico, we're going to get to another story involving an Apple AirTag. So a guy tracking down someone who stole his truck using an Apple AirTag and ended up shooting this individual and killing him. We're going to get into that story. And then last, we're going to close out with the Ralph Yarl story, who was the 16-year-old kid who ended up getting shot twice for ringing the wrong doorbell. And so, again, all these stories are very tragic and unfortunate, but we're going to break them down. I'm going to give you some legal analysis, give you my opinions. And so I definitely want to let you know, this is not a lecture. I'd hope for it to be interactive. So if you have questions as we go through this stuff, I certainly invite questions and comments. So definitely make sure you participate. Sergio, what's up? Thank you for checking in. So, I've been active. I've been active in these digital streets. And so if you've seen a lot more of me on social media, I've been uploading a lot more reels, getting into some TikTok. Been active on YouTube, on Facebook, and that's the point. If you've seen me more out here, buckle up because there's going to be a lot more. Definitely, at Kersey Law, we've been doing some amazing work in the community, getting a lot of people out of some difficult situations, and I just feel like I have a duty and a moral obligation to put out as much information as I can so that if somebody gets in a jam, then they're able to find us. Right, we've been able to do so many good things for really good people, and we want to continue to do that. So I'm going to continue to put out messages out here, and then also it's just good to keep the people informed. Right, so many people aren't aware of their rights, and we want to make sure we have an educated people. And then on top of that, this stuff is just interesting. Right, I've been practicing law for quite some time in criminal defense, pretty much my whole career. And, America loves crime dramas. And so to be able to get the legal breakdown, that's where we're at. All right. So, I hope you guys have been doing well. I have myself, I've been trying to get healthy again. Right. So, it's a lifelong journey. Right. Sometimes we do well and then, life gets busy, we fall off. But, definitely really been dedicated. Right. Been getting my veggies in, drinking juices, green juices, right. Getting the water in. Got my water right here. And just doing all those things to live better. Right. Remember that big pun video? I don't remember which one it was, where he's like, man, I want to live. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I want to live. I want to live well. I want to live happy. And there's that whole thing of, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? And God willing, he doesn't allow that to happen to me. We could suffer from some sort of terminal illness. You could die in a week, in a month, in a year, right? But if those things happen, then they happen. But I don't want to get taken out for something that I could have prevented just by treating my body a little better. So because we can be stubborn sometimes, right? You go to the doctor and doctor tells you, all right, man, you got to cut out the donuts, you got to cut out the cigarettes and cut out the whiskey. You're like, man, I can't let that go. Right. I need my Krispy Kremes and my Newports and my Jack Daniels, right? Yeah, we get stubborn. So yeah, I'm just doing what I can to make sure that I'm living my best life and I'm not doing something that's going to take myself out, right? And share with me. Leave me in the comments. Leave me a recommendation. What are you doing to make your life better? What are you doing to improve your life? And on social media, on IG, on Facebook, I'll share some of my workouts and post stuff like that. And I think that's helpful, right? I see some of my friends post stuff, and I might be in one of those ruts where I haven't been working out, I haven't been eating well, and then I see somebody post a meal on social media. I see somebody post a run or a workout or whatever, and then I get inspired to get back on track. So it's the whole iron sharpen iron type thing, right? So I think it's all about your intentions, right? Sometimes people will get onto social media and show off, right? You're showing off your lifestyle. Oh, I'm so much better than you and all that kind of stuff. But I think it comes down to your intention, just like in anything, right? You have to look at a person's intention. And me personally, when I post that stuff, it's because I know that, when I see my boys or, my girls post something and it inspires me, then I just want to do the same, right? So if you have some sort of tweak, some sort of hack, some sort of helpful thing that's going to help, leave something in the comments below, right? One of those other things is I'm getting more sleep. I'm getting better sleep. Sometimes I get to bed by 7:30. I never thought I'd be that guy getting to bed by 7:30, but man, it's amazing to be able to get that full 8 hours of sleep. You wake up refreshed. It's always a good thing. It's always a good look to be able to get out of bed, on your own terms, right? To feel like you're getting out of bed because it's something that you want to do, like you're focused, you're ready to take on the day, versus feeling like you're getting dragged out of the bed. It's just like it's a completely different way to start the day. That's one of the tips that I have. Get to bed on time, get more veggies in, get your water in, be healthy. All right, so let's get into this first story. All right, Alec Baldwin, right? Before I say anything, like I said, I wanted to be respectful to the victims in this case. And Sergio, I see your question. I'll get to that. This case, was a tragedy. So we definitely want to start by saying rest in peace to Helena Hutchins, just going to work, shooting a film that's supposed to be a very, pleasant and happy moment in your life. And she ends up losing her life on the set doing, what she loves. And so we definitely want to say rest in peace to her, thoughts and prayers to her friends and family and loved ones. But the case recently got dismissed. Either it's already been dismissed or it's about to be dismissed. So the news was already put out that the case is going to be dismissed against Alec Baldwin. And me personally, I believe that he should not have been charged in the first place, right? And so if you remember, this incident had taken place on the movie set for Rust, right? And Alec Baldwin was not only an actor in the film, but he was also a producer, which ended up heightening his responsibility on that set, right? And so he has a gun in his hand, and in between takes, while they're preparing for the next take, I guess, the gun goes off and a bullet ends up striking Miss Hutchins. She succumbs to her wounds, and then another individual was also hurt on that set, right? And so Alec Baldwin came out very early on and gave a statement, right? So he gave a sit-down interview, and the big takeaway from this interview was that I did not pull this trigger, right? And for me, I do not like at all. I don't like people going and giving interviews to police. And when it comes to celebrities who have, a platform, whether it's going on IG Live or, booking an interview on ABC where they're sitting down with somebody and being able to say their side of the story. I don't like that, right? I do not like that. And so I get it. I understand from, a PR standpoint, from a public relations standpoint, you want to get your narrative out there, right? Because, there's going to be huge pushback, and there was huge pushback from the community on, okay, well, how could you be so irresponsible to shoot somebody on your set and everything? And so I get the natural desire to get out and be able to tell your side of the story. But, as a defense attorney, right? Because a lot of times, as the professional, our position is going to be different from what the client's position is emotionally, right? So those, at the end of the day, our loyalty as attorneys is to our clients. Our loyalty is to our clients, but we have to do what is best for our clients, right? And that's not always what they want to do. And so my advice, if I had a celebrity client like that, would be like, no, we're not sitting down and giving any interviews, none of that. You have to be able to believe in the course that we have in place, right? And if they weren't able to do that, if they couldn't take my advice and take it seriously and say, okay, well, I get it. As much as I want to give a statement, I'm going to take your advice and not do that, then we probably would not be able to continue on with the attorney client relationship, because at the end of the day, you are the client, and you get to do, you get to take your defense where you want it to go. But as the professional in the situation, I'm going to tell you what's best for you and what's not good for you, right? And we can we can weigh the pros and cons. I'm not just going to shut you down. I'm going to explain all the reasons why it's not good to do. And so, even if you're innocent, right? For innocent people, whether that's giving an interview on national television or sitting down with the police, it's generally not going to be advisable, right? There is a constitutional right to remain silent for a reason. When you're giving an interview, whether that's during a police interrogation or on TV, you can slip up. You might be mistaken as to certain facts, right? You might have misspoken, okay? And your words could be possibly misinterpreted. And now you're locked in to a particular statement because it's recorded, right? You could be inadvertently filling holes in the police's investigation, right? You might be giving them things that you think are completely inconsequential or completely meaningless, and that's what the police feel like, okay, well, now we have probable cause to move forward with an arrest, or now we feel like we've got him, right? And again, you're locked into that statement because ultimately, if you come out later and try and say something that is inconsistent with what you said during that interview, right? So let's just say you made an honest mistake as to a certain fact, and then you seem to recall like, okay, nah, that's not what happened. This is actually what happened. But now you're locked in to that statement you previously gave, whether it was to the detective or on the TV, and you're locked in. So then you're subjecting yourself to, on some level, someone being able to question, whether that's a detective or a DA, in a cross-examination. It's like, okay, well, were you lying back then or are you lying now? And, you might be able to get out of that, right? We would be able to coach you through how to deal with that sort of line of questioning, but you're basically setting yourself up for, unnecessary hurdles that wouldn't have been there if you had just taken advice and decided not to give that interview or decided not to sit down with the police, right? So you ultimately have to fight the very natural urge, the very natural urge of wanting to get out there and say your piece, right? Despite all the backlash and negativity that's going to come along with that. And, hopefully in that situation, you have like a good circle around you that's going to keep you grounded, because I can imagine, it's hard enough for my clients who do not have paparazzi following them all over the place, don't have news and media outlets posting things about you, nasty things about you that may not even be true, people talking about you in public forums. So it's natural to want to get out there and clear the air. But, again, that's just not always the best thing. And listen, people are going to talk anyway, right? No matter what you do, whether you do good or whether you do bad, people are going to talk about you anyway. Now, I like to talk about sports and use, sports analogies. You look at a guy like Tom Brady, right? The greatest quarterback of all time. Some have him as the greatest football player of all time, right? And, I was wrong on this one. I used to go back and forth with my boy saying that Peyton Manning was the GOAT, right? Peyton Manning was the best quarterback in the league at the time. And, Peyton proved me terribly wrong, right? Obviously an amazing quarterback, but, probably amazing regular season quarterback, right? Versus Tom Brady, who can't even fit all his rings in one hand, right? But you have, if you look at any sports forum, people are going to be talking trash about Tom Brady, right? So if they can talk trash about somebody who is the greatest of all time, you know, most of us are going to fall short in life of being the greatest of all time. So you just got to be able to sustain, stay grounded and not worry about, about that. And ideally you have a solid plan in place, right? To ultimately get you through this. And that's where, it comes down to really being able to trust in your attorney, trust that they have your best interests at heart, trust that they're going to do everything that they can to get you out of this situation, right? And again, it comes down to having that good, circle of friends and family, loved ones who are going to hold you down when you're in that dark space, right? So again, Baldwin comes out and basically makes this statement that says, hey, I never pulled the trigger, right? And so that left a lot of people like, come on, man. Like, how is it that this gun went off? You ended up shooting this woman if you never pulled the trigger, right? And again, he was very adamant about that and confident in his position that he never pulled the trigger. And so what made that situation a bit worse is that the FBI then comes out and says, well, we did our analysis, we did our investigation, and here's our report that says that this gun, right? This gun could not have gone off without him having pulled the trigger. And so now he just looks like, a liar, right? For me though, even though that was a situation, like I just wasn't going to take the FBI's word for it, right? I've seen law enforcement make too many mistakes over the years to just say, okay, well, the FBI came out and said that it couldn't have gone off without him firing it. All right, I'm going to take their word for it. Nah, because I also know that, experts can vastly differ in their opinions on the same subject matter, right? And so in that situation, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, it does not look good that the FBI is coming out and giving this statement or giving this report saying that the gun could not have gone off without him pulling the trigger, and him just, weeks before coming out and saying, I did not pull the trigger, right? Because who's the general public going to side with? The FBI. Who is the DA, right? The DA that's reviewing this case. Who's the DA going to side with? The FBI, right? They're going to run with what law enforcement, what this agency provided, which is that this gun could not have gone off without Alec Baldwin pulling the trigger. And so, my thoughts was like, hey, listen, Baldwin's legal team, they just better have a solid legal expert who can refute this information, right? To be able to say, no, we went through this information as well. And there is a way, right? I don't know how they'd explain it, but there is a way that this gun can go off absent him pulling the trigger, right? So if I'm his lawyers, I'm calling all around the country. In fact, possibly all over the world, right? I'm calling all over the world to find an expert who's going to be able to tell me that, there's another way that this gun can go off, right? But I need to know one way or the other, right? I'm, as a defense attorney, you're obviously hoping that you can find an expert who's going to, and not lie, but an expert who's going to be able to tell you that yes, we're, your client's position makes sense and this is why, right? But if that's not the case, right? If there's no way, given the facts of the situation, given the circumstances, if there's no way that the evidence ultimately would support your client's position, then you need to know that as well, because that's then going to have an impact on your defense strategy, right? And so for me personally, and there are a lot of lawyers out there, I think, who do run with BS positions and theories. But for me, I'm just a reasonable person. I'm not the type of lawyer that just likes to argue a position just to argue it. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put up a BS defense theory just to have something to say, just to have something to put up. I personally can't stand when lawyers do that. Sometimes you have to concede a point. Sometimes, you'd like to be able to put forth a particular theory, but it's just not there. And if it's not there, then you cannot force it, right? So, again, if the evidence doesn't support your position, then you got to be able to pivot and move in a different way. But ultimately, the prosecution was persuaded to dismiss, and it's interesting because there even the New Mexican DA, they had given a press conference, right? And that's not something that typically happens, right? Because crime happens every day, people get charged every day, new felony cases get filed every day, even serious ones. This obviously someone lost their life in this case, but there are other cases in which people lose their life and there's never any sort of press that's given to it, right? The DA that's on the case isn't sitting down and giving interviews on whatever it was, might have been 60 minutes or something like that, but the prosecutor came out and gave their interview. And why? Because Alec Baldwin's involved, right? This was a big Hollywood situation. But at the end of the day, again, the information that ended up coming out, because there was some information that was ultimately released that said that, hey, this gun had been modified, right? So it wasn't like, and I don't know if the FBI had this information when they had done their analysis, but what the defense presented was that, hey, this gun is not the same stock gun as when purchased originally, right? So it had been modified, and it was a Colt 45 that had been modified using new parts. So therefore, if you have a modification, then and I don't know how this could be done, but somehow they were able to say that with these modifications, perhaps the gun could have gone off short of Baldwin pulling the trigger. And I think that the DA, in reviewing the case, probably would have ended up thinking like, okay, well, maybe we can't prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. So, maybe we need to do something different. So, we still have, if Baldwin is out now, there's still Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She was the armorer, right? She was the armorer for the movie. And, this case is really interesting because, as lawyers, we understand the law, right? But there's always going to be new situations that come out at you, right? And I personally have never defended a case. I've defended a number of homicide cases. I have a couple of active homicide cases as we speak, but I've never dealt with a situation on a movie set, right? So the facts of this case going on right now, the armorer is also being charged, right? So she was a co-defendant with Alec Baldwin. And so she was responsible for the firearms on the set. And so I did a little bit of research and realized like armorers have a great deal of responsibility. You actually have to do certain certifications. So you have to be certified in order to be an armorer. You can't just, come off the streets and apply for the armorer job and get it. Like, nah, you have to have certain certifications because, as you can see right now, when an armorer does not do their job properly, people can die. And unfortunately, in this situation, someone did, right? So they're the ones, they check the weapons between takes. They make sure that the weapons get cleaned every day. They store the weapons in a safe and secure manner, right? They're ultimately responsible for any and everything that's related to the firearms on a movie set. And so, according to experts, I was kind of looking at some information and they said that you would never, ever, 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 ever have live rounds on a movie set. Yet somehow there was live rounds on this movie set, right? And, additional new news or information that I didn't have is that, Miss Gutierrez Reed apparently had admitted that she had put the live round in the gun. And I didn't see, any further elaboration on that, but that was an admission that she made. And, this was my whole thing from the beginning, right? So Baldwin wasn't there when they were loading this gun, right? And there was nothing to suggest whatsoever that this happened on purpose, right? So Baldwin didn't, purposely or maliciously point the gun at Helena Hutchins and shoot her, out of spite or out of anger or intentionally, right? This was just simply a tragic accident. And so, when we look at this serious accident, we're trying to figure out, okay, who is to blame here, right? And the natural response, I think, and the response from many people was like, oh, well, it's Alec Baldwin, right? He pulled the trigger. How is he not responsible for this? And people had very, very, very impassioned opinions on this situation. But for me, I did not, really ever place the blame on Alec Baldwin. And I get it. I understand. And, more than enough people have since said, hey, you never point a gun directly at somebody. And I completely understand that. And I get why people say that. But for me, it always came back to there should never be a live round on a movie set. And, and this kind of goes back to Baldwin saying, okay, well, he never pulled the trigger, right? Okay. So let's just assume that he did not. But even if he did, my whole thing was that, and you should never do anything like this, right? But my whole thing was that if I'm on a movie set and I have this gun, I should be able to, right? I should be able to put the gun to the side of my head and pull the trigger and have no fear whatsoever of me blowing my brains out. Why? Because live rounds have no business on this set. And I understand that's a very exaggerated example. I'd never encourage anybody to do that. And I feel like nowadays in 2023, you got to say, don't do this. Don't put a gun to your side of your head and pull the trigger, right? You feel like that should go without saying, but people were out here eating Tide Pods, right? And that that actually brings me to a question. I didn't see what the whole story was about people eating Tide Pods, but I have a couple questions. Like, who was coming out saying that you should eat Tide Pods? Like, how did that even become a suggestion, right? Number one. And then number two, like, who saw that and was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just eat these Tide Pods. That's crazy to me, right? But I digress. Again, I should realistically be able to take a gun, in my opinion, right? I should be able to take a gun on a movie set and feel comfortable, pointing it at the side of my head and pulling the trigger. Why? Because there's not supposed to be any live rounds in this gun. All right, there's a whole business. Listen, there's an armorer whose sole job on the movie set is to make sure that these guns are kept safely and that something like this doesn't happen. And then even like when you go to order the ammunition for this movie, like, all right, I'd like to order a box of 100 rounds. They're going to be prop rounds or dummy rounds. Oh, what's it for? For a movie. Okay, cool. Well, here's your 100 rounds. We'll have them ready for you by, Wednesday. Okay, cool. I can go and pick them up. I should not have to at that point, right? If I'm the armorer, I should be able to put stock in what you said. I shouldn't have to go and check if these are, oh, did you happen to slip a live round in the, in the box? And that's the thing. I think that's, we're getting a little nitpicky here, but that's the level of trust that as the actor on the set, I shouldn't have to question whether the ammunition supplier, slipped live rounds into the box of dummy rounds. I shouldn't have to question whether the armorer did their job properly and make sure that there's no live rounds in this gun. And as me, as the end user, as the actor, again, I get it in terms of not pointing the gun at somebody, but really, I mean, this is where I don't see criminal liability for somebody at the end, because there just really should have never been any live rounds in that gun in the first place. But I one of the other issues that I think in this situation was that New Mexico, they just might have been a little out of their element on this one, right? You have a very high profile defendant, right? And this, the facts of this case just feels very Hollywood, right? And you would see these type of cases in LA, right? LA County DA handles matters like this all the time with high profile people being accused of a crime. In New Mexico, not so much, right? So, maybe somebody sees that moment to, come out, and this is a career making, career defining moment. You were able to prosecute Alec Baldwin, right? But, perhaps they might have gone all in too soon in this situation, right? But I also think that the fact that there was a civil case going on, that probably helped on some level. So, there was a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed. So, on behalf of the family of Helena Hutchins. So, when a person loses their life, and especially when you're dealing with like a work situation, the family can file a wrongful death lawsuit. And so then there's, pain and suffering, and all of the wages that that person could have earned over their lifetime, because the children, they have a right to be able to receive the benefit of what, their mother or their father would have made throughout the course of their life. And so, there was this wrongful death suit filed very early on. And, obviously no amount of money whatsoever will bring back Miss Hutchins. No amount of money will, can possibly make this family whole. It's just a loss that you can't compensate for. But in our legal system, that's the only way that we have to somehow try and make someone whole. But at the end of the day, if the family is given a settlement, right? And that's probably going to be undisclosed. We'll never know what the amount is going to be. But if they're given a settlement, then I just think that that's going to be so much more meaningful to the family than it would have been to prosecute Alec Baldwin, right? So this is just a tragic situation that ended wrong, ended badly. It's terrible that this happened, but I'm glad that it's going down this way, that he's being let out of this prosecution, because I just really feel like he shouldn't have been charged in the first place. All right, so moving on, just a couple weeks ago, this story is out of Texas, out of San Antonio, and this is probably this would be the worst Apple commercial, right? Apple really has been able to dominate their marketing when it comes to promoting their products and everything, right? When you have those comparisons between Apple and Microsoft, right? These are the titans of tech. And Apple really, they were able to use lifestyle to sell, their phones, right? And lifestyle and status, right? You wanted to have the white AirPods or the white earphones coming out, and you had people, active, taking pictures, shooting music videos, basically living life as part of their promotions, right? Compared to Microsoft, where it just seemed to be focused on the specs, right? And nobody really cares about specs. They want to know, can I take a good selfie, right? Can I shoot my baby crawling for the first time and it be really cool and be able to upload it to Facebook and all that kind of stuff? That is what sells, right? But this use of an Apple AirTag would be the worst Apple commercial, but this is what went down. On March 29th, around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, San Antonio Police Department, they received a report of a stolen vehicle, right? And so the owners, they were able to track down this truck because there was an Apple AirTag in it, right? So I don't know if they had the AirTag just stuck to the body of the truck, or if they had if it was linked to some sort of piece of property inside the truck or what have you. But either way, the owners were able to track this truck down, right? And so it's interesting because they called the police, right? Um, and that's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do in the situation, to call the police. And you were talking about the Sean Kemp case, right? Where he also had his, iPhone and some personal belongings that were stolen from him. And he was able to track down those items using Find My iPhone, and ended up, going to the scene, and he had his gun on him, and the incident ended with him shooting, right? And now he's facing some very serious charges, first degree assault charges related to that. And so that from that came my advice to not just it doesn't make sense to me to go and track down to engage in a confrontation with somebody who stole from you, somebody who's so brazen as to take your property. To go there and try and confront them to get your property back is just asking for trouble. And that's exactly why Sean Kemp, in that situation, he was armed, and this particular individual, when he went to confront this individual, he was armed too, right? You don't go to a situation armed unless there's a high likelihood of a confrontation that could also, potentially in deadly, right? And so the truck was actually at a shopping center on the other side of town, right? And so the owner of the truck ends up going to the shopping center. Right. And they pull up. So they get there before the police get there. So they get there, and, one of the owners gets out to confront the thief. And apparently, based on what the owner says, what he reported to the police, he says that the thief ended up pulling out a firearm. Right. And if a thief pulls out a firearm, or if anybody pulls out a firearm on you, right, then that is going to put you in fear, right? In reasonable fear of imminent harm, right? Of, you either getting killed or seriously injured. So that would then give you the right to act in self-defense. And you could act in self-defense using even deadly force in that situation. And that's what he ultimately did. He ended up shooting at the thief and actually shot him right in the head, right? So this is a guy who apparently had some good aim, right? And so when the police get there, shooter standing right there. He's like, "Hey, I admitted," or he admitted, "Hey, I was involved in this shooting. This guy stole my truck, and I ended up shooting him." And they ended up arresting him, taking him into custody, without incident. They didn't have to, run and track him down because he was trying to flee arrest, or he didn't get violent with them when they went to arrest him. He just, they took him into custody without incident. And the thief ended up, being taken to the hospital, and he was shortly thereafter pronounced dead. So he lost his life for stealing a truck. And the interesting thing about this case right now is they're in the process. The police are determining whether or not charges are going to be filed. And what they're investigating, or at least part of what they're investigating, is whether the thief did in fact have a gun. And I think that ends up being really important, because if he did have a gun, if they found a gun on his person, then that makes the self-defense position all the more credible, right? Because, he could really say, "Hey, I confronted him about having my truck. The guy pulled out a gun. I pulled out mine. I shot him, killed him. Boom. I'm sorry he lost his life, but, he threatened me. I needed to be able to go home to my family. And so, I wasn't going to wait for him to shoot me first." Right. But if he doesn't have a gun, right? If they didn't find a gun there, which this really shouldn't hold up things too long. I mean, it's not like the guy went anywhere, right? The guy got shot in the head in the truck, so he's sitting in the truck. So a gun is either there or it's not, right? But if there is no gun there, then it just sounds like you made up this story to be able to argue that you were acting in self-defense when you really weren't. And then that's assault. That's voluntary manslaughter, or even second degree murder. It's probably not going to be first degree. We're not going to say this was premeditated and deliberate, but they could say that they were acting with malice, acting with intent to kill, and so therefore he could be facing murder charges. But man, I me personally, I just hate having things stolen, man. I work too damn hard for the stuff that I have. And it's not fair. It's not fair for somebody to just decide, "Hey, man, I'm gonna just take this dude's stuff." right? I remember I had a couple years ago, someone broke into my car, busted my window, and took my speaker stands, man. When I was doing a lot of mobile DJing, I had done a gig. I think I actually when I was DJing for the man, when I was DJing for the basketball team. Yep. And I left the I was working DJing for the Guardians, the basketball team. Um what's good, Don K? Appreciate you. Appreciate you pulling up. Hey Shorty, what's up? What's good with you? What's good? Hey, all is well out here in Cali, man. I appreciate you. Appreciate you. Sergio, I missed this. Dak Prescott is number one. Oh man, I mean, I get the loyal love, right? Loyalty. It looks like you're from Texas, but come on, man, we can't argue with the GOAT, man. That's Tom Brady all day. Um, and I appreciate that, Don K. I always tell folks, I hope you never get in trouble. I really hope that you never get in trouble, but at some point, somebody in your life will, and we're here to take care of them. All right. Oh, you out here, huh? What city are you in? Are you actually out in San Diego? What's good? Um, so it's yeah, I got those speaker stands stolen, man, and man, those speaker stands aren't cheap, man. It's like $150 for speaker stands, but it's just annoying, man. People breaking into your stuff and stealing. That's not cool. But my point in bringing that up is, it is really annoying. It's upsetting for somebody to violate your property and steal your stuff. But what I don't exactly like is that the thief here ended up losing his life, man. He lost his life over a truck. And again, like people will say that, oh man, he's the scum of society, stealing people's trucks and all that kind of stuff. And I get it, man. I understand, man. You drop 30, 40, $50,000, or I don't care if you drop $5,000 on a truck and it's yours and somebody takes that truck, right? Could be how you get to work, how you get back and forth to work, how you take your kids to school. You might use it on the job. So I get it, but it's difficult, man. It's difficult to I hear you, Dom K. You ain't gotta drop the location, man. Um, but it's difficult, especially as a defense attorney. When I sit and see people who do resort to theft and you see what the backstory is and everything, you're like, man, there's other ways to get out here and get this, man. But I just don't like somebody losing their life, right? Losing their life over a truck. Yeah. Have him holler at me, man. Have him Google Kersey Law. If he's out in California, we could definitely help. We definitely help people with gun charges all the time, especially military. We represent a lot of military members who are from out south, down south, and our gun laws are just different, man. A lot of people just are used to having their gun sitting in the glove box or sitting on the floorboard or on the seat, and where they're from, down south, usually Midwest, it's no problem. But out here, we just don't rock like that. And so a lot of these military cats come out here and they're not aware of our gun laws, and they're different, and they'll definitely get you for that. So yeah, have them Google Kersey Law, and we'll get them taken care of. But yeah, man, I don't like somebody losing their life over theft, over a 10, 15, 20,000 whatever truck. Even if it was a Range Rover, man. I don't like the idea of somebody losing their life over that. And a lot of people will respond, "Oh man, play stupid games, win stupid prizes," right? A lot of people like to say stuff like that. And for me, like I really don't understand, like, and maybe it's always been this way, but we've become so desensitized to death that people can be so cold about somebody losing their life, man. And I don't like that. I don't like how cold we are about people getting killed, even if they ask for it, right? And because we have laws. There are laws, there are laws in place to punish thieves. And the penalty for theft is not death, right? But I've said it once, I'll say it again. I don't believe that you should use an Apple AirTag or I find my iPhone or anything like that to track down, with prepared to engage in a confrontation. I think if you are able to track your stuff down, that's great. Get law enforcement involved. Have them do their job and be able to, properly secure your property. Or if you can't get it back, you just can't get it back. If it's worth that much, ideally it's insured. If it's not, you take the loss, because it's just not worth getting into what could be a confrontation that could, end up having you lose your life or going to jail. This guy, ideally, if he was in fact acting in self-defense, ideally, law enforcement will exercise their discretion, not even charge him. Right, he'll be able to go on with his life. Or a guy like Sean Kemp, where they've already done that analysis, right? So when they arrested him and then they let him go, they were conducting their investigation, and they were like, okay, well, if we see that he was in fact acting in self-defense, all right, we'll close this out and let it go. But they've made their determination that he wasn't acting in self-defense, and now he's facing this first-degree assault charge. Over what, man? Over what? Some material things? I can guarantee you nothing that was in that bag was worth him risking his freedom for. Over. I just can't see it. I can't see it. But that's that. So man, so for this last issue, I want to take it back to 1996. 1996, in my opinion, was the best year in hip hop. For me, that's undebatable. Perhaps 1994, right? When Illmatic dropped and a whole host of other fire. But 96 was it for me, right? Reasonable Doubt. Reasonable Doubt dropped. And man, me and my boy wore the hell out of that record with Big and Jay-Z. Jay-Z, was it Jay-Z and Biggie Smalls make you shit your drawers? Man, that's iconic, man, to have that record, man, on your debut album, Big and Jay, two kings of New York, right? Still listen to Reasonable Doubt daily. Hey, I'm not mad at that. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite of Jay-Z's, but I'm not mad at that. I was on the treadmill the other day listening to that B-Sides album, or the B-Sides concert, right? So Jay-Z's got a B-Sides concert on YouTube in its whole entirety. And it's a trip, man. He's doing it with a band. And you're like, man, we had all these verses, right? You're like, man, Jay-Z could kill somebody in a verses just using B-sides. That's insane. That's insane that you could have a concert of just B-sides. How many artists can do that? And because like people, I just feel like there's a lack of respect, and I don't like it. And especially with that, I don't remember what the cast name is on the Grizzlies, coming at LeBron James. And I feel like, man, you gotta have done something in your life, done something in your career to come at certain people like that. I think like there's a lack of respect, there's a lack of self-awareness to come at legends, and you haven't earned the right to be able to do that. And I think that's what up, BJ? You haven't missed it yet. We're still going. We're still going. We're on the last story, but we're still going. What's good, man? Don K hit me with all these Jay-Z lyrics, man. But yeah, man. Ooh, the second greatest rapper ever behind Wayne, man. Listen, I'm not mad at anybody that has Lil Wayne, in their top 10. But Hove's got that spot. And Lil Wayne himself would tell you that. But man, you got me digressing out here, man. But yeah, man. So we're gonna get back to this 96 being the best year in hip hop. But no, let me close out that thought. Like I want people to start respecting the legends, putting respect on their name as they should properly, man. You got to earn the right to come at kings, man. But yeah, so anyhow, 96, best year in hip hop. Hey man. Hey, listen, mixtape Wheezy. You know, I'm not mad at it. He's had a brilliant run, but Ho's the king, man. Ho's the king of this. So 96, right? You got Reasonable Doubt. You got It Was Written. You got Mobb Deep, Hell on Earth, Pac, All Eyes on Me. Right? You had Outkast, you had ATLiens, you had Fugees, The Score. It was a brilliant year in hip hop. You got Iron Man, this right here, this joint right here. You got Iron Man. What else dropped? You had and that's actually my favorite Wu solo joint, man. That next to Only Built for Cuban Links. You also have you had Busta Rhymes, The Coming, and you had The Roots, Illadelph Half-Life, and there's a bunch of other ones. That's actually Illadelph Half-Life is my favorite Roots album. And you know, we're going back to 96 because that's when I was 16 years old. And when I was 16 years old, man, I was finishing up sophomore year of high school. You know, I was in the marching band. You know, I love music. Most of my friends were all music ties, right? Music really was all I cared about. Music was all I cared about. You know, it was hip hop and rock music and being in a marching band. And, you know, I was in all kinds of band classes and all this kind of stuff. All my closest friends, musicians. And I was a little kid growing up on the East Side, right? And when I lived on the East Side, you know, there were Crips in the neighborhood. We had essays in the neighborhood. It was all love, you know, grew up with essays, grew up with Crips, grew up with, you know, cats whose older brothers and sisters and all of that were, you know, Crips and essays. And there was that element, right? And I went to the Oceanside Boys and Girls Club, right? And, you know, I really, you know, every time I can, I shout out the Oceanside Boys and Girls Club and those type of organizations, because it's so vital and crucial to have those type of organizations out there of people who really care and really are out there keeping the youth safe, man. So I got to shout out, you know, by name, Randall, Wayne, Esther, Hollins, Mike Hollins, Nacho, Armando, Yvonne, all these people who, you know, help keep us safe, you know what I'm saying? And safe and off the streets, and kept us, you know, away from all the bullshit that was going on in our hood, right? And so between the Boys and Girls Club, between, you know, being in band, between hanging out with my homies and doing my thing, I stayed out of trouble for the most part, man. I really did. And so, you know, I was a kid who did my thing, you know, and sometimes got into a little bit of trouble. Yeah, man, 96 was legendary. The next year, Hot Boys and Wayne was birthed. The Hot Boys. Yeah, man. But you know, I was a good kid, man. I was raised right. I grew up in the church. I played music in the church, sang in the little, you know, kids choir and all of that. My grandfather was a pastor. You know, my aunt was a choir director. My sister was an usher. My mom was an usher. 95. All right. I'm not mad at 95, but for me it's 94 and 96. But you know, I was a poor kid out of the East Side, man. And fortunately, you know, or you know, not fortunately, it didn't matter. I mean, I have friends in my hood and I had friends that lived in nicer areas, right? And I mean a lot nicer areas. You know what I'm saying? And you know, when you go to the suburbs, when you go to the burbs, A lot of times, like you'll go to these tract homes, and a lot of the houses, they look a lot. They just look the same, right? You could go down one street and it looks exactly like the street that's right next to it. And I can remember specifically going to a few of my homies' houses over the years and kind of getting like lost or turn around, like, damn, am I on the right street? Or, right? And I just think, as I heard this story, I think that what if somehow, I ended up in the wrong cul-de-sac, right? I'm in the wrong cul-de-sac and I ring the doorbell and I think it's gonna be my homie, like, hey man, what's up? Let's go play basketball, let's go to the gym, let's go ride and listen to music or whatever the situation was, or his mom opens the door, right, and gives me a hug. He's like, hey, Miss So-and-so, how you doing? Right. But instead of seeing my homie, his mom, his dad, his brother, an unfamiliar individual opens the door and just starts blasting. 16-year-old Ralph Yarl was just going, he wasn't going to his homie's house. All he was doing was going to pick up his younger siblings. And, apparently he made a mistake and went to the wrong address. That's, instead of, I don't remember the name of the street, but instead of like Spring Hill Street, it was Spring Hill Drive or something like that. Ended up going to the wrong address. And when he got to the door, he rang the doorbell, and Andrew Lester ends up shooting him in the head and in the arm. And, this man is I think this is kind of hitting me in a way that I wasn't expecting to as I was looking up the facts of the story. And I think that it's just becoming too much. It's becoming too much to hear about these type of stories just over and over and over and over again. Young, unarmed black men, young black men just getting killed for just doing regular everyday stuff. It really is, Darcy. It is so sad. Did you go to Oregon? Is that what that O is in the background? Did you go to Oregon? Shout out to Oregon. And yeah, so he basically rang the wrong doorbell and got shot for it. And Andrew Lester, he gave a statement to the police, and he basically said, hey, I was about to go to bed. I heard the doorbell, and I went to go grab my gun, grab a 32 caliber revolver. And for me, I think that was interesting in and of itself, that you hear the doorbell and you go to get your gun. Like that really, strikes me as interesting and odd. Okay. Shout out to your son. Go Ducks. You know what I mean? It struck me as interesting that you would go to get your gun just because you hear the doorbell. That's crazy. Because the last thing I think of, when somebody either knocks on the door or rings the doorbell, is that like my life is in danger. Even right, even living in bad neighborhoods, I never thought like, oh man, I need to, I've never had a gun, but that it just never would have crossed my mind that I needed to be armed to answer the door. But Andrew Lester goes and gets this gun, and he says that he saw a black male that he didn't know pulling on the exterior door handle, the exterior storm door handle, and thought his home was being broken into, right? So apparently he had like the main door and then this storm door. So two doors there, right? And that if the guy's, Yarl is pulling on the door handle, he thinks his home is being broken into. And so he said in response, he ends up firing twice through the glass door. So the main door is still closed, right? So he fires, the young man runs away. There was no words exchanged. And he said that he reported that firing the weapon was the last thing that I wanted to do, but he was scared to death because of his age and the male size. And he reported this kid being, over 6 feet tall. And mind you, he's only, 5'8". And, I think in the statement that he gave, it seemed to me that, he was basically laying the foundation. And I don't know if he had already spoken to a lawyer or not, or just might have been, savvy or know his rights. But it sounded like, we had this sort of castle doctrine, self-defense type situation, right? Okay, well, I felt in fear of my safety, and that's what ultimately justified me shooting through this door. And I'd say, man, if you're shooting somebody at, that closely, you're using deadly force at that point, and there is, some sort of intent to kill. And despite being shot in the head, miraculously, thankfully, this young man, he didn't die, right? And but the interesting thing is that, he was able to speak, and recall, and apparently be able to give a statement with some level of lucidity, even though, he had just been shot. But he said, and there are some vital differences in his recounting of the events compared to what Andrew Lester said, because he said that he did not pull on the door handle, right? So that's a very, very, very important distinction. He said that he rang the doorbell and he just waited like people normally do, right? So he was going to pick up his twin siblings. I don't know if they're both boys, brothers, sisters, but they're younger siblings and they're twins. So he was going to pick them up, rang the doorbell, and waited like you normally would, right? It's not his house. So you typically wouldn't ring the doorbell and just walk in, right? So so he basically said he rang the doorbell and he waited, and then while he was waiting, this guy opened the door and shot at him. And he ends up in the hospital. He was actually released just 3 days later. And I think that's a miracle in and of itself. You get shot in the head, most of the times you're going to die. If you get shot in the head, most of the time you are going to die. And he's apparently expected to make a close to a full recovery. And I just really think that that's fortunate. But he has apparently suffered some permanent physical injuries. He had a cracked skull. He lost some brain tissue, and there's going to be, some permanent scarring physically, right? But, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, I think, this kid is going to have a lot of healing to do. A lot of healing to do. Huh? Can you imagine being 16 years old and just going to pick up your siblings? You knock on the door, ring a doorbell, and a guy just comes out and starts dumping on you. That's crazy, man. Um, but Andrew Lester, he ended up getting detained for questioning, and he was released just, after just 2 hours of questioning. They're like, okay, sir, go on about your way. And then that's what led to naturally the big uproar, man, because you had this whole, slew of protests and black celebrities and public figures, speaking out, because it's like, listen, like, you know, um, and BJ, weighing in. It's tough being being a gun guy, being black. I have never answered my door with my gun, and hey, that's to my point. Like, it just doesn't really seem, something that it just seems so unnecessary, right? When I answer my door at night, my door stays closed, and I use my ring. If I was old school, my door would say close, say who is it, like we did back in the day. I could definitely relate. Yeah, man. um, answering the door with the gun just on the ready, that's wild to me. Like, that just, it seems like such a dark space to live in, that you feel like I need to have my gun on me just to answer the door. That's wild to me. Um, but yeah, so you had a whole slew of blacks, celebrities and public figures who speaking out. We have a bunch of protests, right? And the natural thing that we as black people always do is we think like, man, if that had been a black man, right? Because Andrew Lester, old white man, Ralph Yarl, Ralph Yarl. That name is hard to pronounce. Ralph Yarl, um, teenage black boy, right? And you reverse those roles, man. You have an old white man with a snow white afro, right? And a little blonde kid at the door, man. If that old black man had put 2 bullets in this little white boy in his head and his arm, can you imagine like how America would just collectively flip and lose its shit? Man, America would lose its mind if the roles were reversed, man. We all know that, and I think like to say otherwise, right? If you say otherwise, right? If we had an old black man that had done this and a young white boy, and listen, like sometimes people get upset when you bring race into it, and I think the crazy thing is people get more upset by us bringing up the issues. They get more upset by us bringing up the issues than they are about the issues that trigger our response, which is just crazy, right? Like why don't you direct that energy to all the bullshit that's going on instead of the people that are just complaining about what's going on? That's just so bizarre to me. But yeah, man, if the roles were reversed in this situation, listen, and to say otherwise, right? To say that America wouldn't lose its damn mind, to say that this, an old black man wouldn't still be in jail at this very moment, then you are just being willfully dishonest, or you're just blind. You're blind to the history of this country, and you're blind to what's currently going on today. Um, yeah, just can't imagine, right? And blessings to Ralph, little Ralph, um, throughout his healing process. Absolutely. Um, so Andrew Lester, he's facing charges of first-degree assault and armed criminal action, and he's actually facing up to life in prison. And the interesting thing is, the DA's office, they have not charged this as a hate crime. And I don't necessarily see anything at this point to suggest that that it is a hate crime. But there's this interesting element that keeps getting like reported on, that there is a quote unquote racial element to the case, right? And they haven't exactly specified what that racial element is, but there is the obvious situation that we're dealing with an old white man and a teenage black boy. And to add further nuance and depth to this situation, Andrew Lester's grandson actually took to took to the news to start speaking out on issues going on with his grandfather, right? Saw a little news interview, and he basically was saying, hey man, like his actions are his responsibility, and he basically mentioned how his grandfather sits and watches the news and hears all these conspiracies and everything, and that has had some sort of negative impact on his mind. And and I personally am not a big fan of the news. I haven't actively watched the news in well over a decade. I'll check in to from time to time, and especially now that I'm reporting on some of this stuff and going through legal analysis of cases in the news. I have to do that, but to sit up and just watch the news, no, I haven't done that in well over a decade. To me, it just the negativity is too much, right? And one of the initial thoughts that I had about like, oh man, well, if I stop watching the news, am I going to miss out on stuff? And no, the answer is no. If something is that big, something's that important, at some point it will reach you. And most of the time, if it is that big, a lot of times there's nothing I can do about it, right? I'm not going to have any effect whatsoever on what's going on. So all I can do is, protect me and mine, make sure that I'm doing the right thing, make sure that I'm putting out all the good, energy and actions out into the world. And I have to believe that that's good enough, right? But for me to sit up and consume the news, like I'm not helping anybody at all in that situation or helping myself. In fact, I just feel like to sit up and consume that stuff is is detrimental, is a lot more detrimental to my mental health than whatever value I would get from watching the news. Um, and so, he went on to say that Ralph deserves justice, regardless of his relationship to the shooter, right? So, hey, my grandpa is being charged with this crime, but he deserves justice, and I agree. And he said, Black Lives Matter always, and I obviously agree with that as well. And still cannot believe like how controversial how controversial it's been to say that Black Lives Matter. Like that's not saying, like, there's a lot of things that Black Lives Matter is not saying. Right? But somehow that's just been flipped into something that is just way more than just saying, hey, Black Lives Matter. But Ralph Yarl, man, he's an honor student. He's a section leader in the marching band. He plays a bass clarinet, and his family describes him as the sweetest kid. And you know, I'm glad that information came out, right? That this kid is just such an outstanding individual. It sounds like he has plans to go to college in the future. It sounds like he has a very bright future ahead of him, and ideally, like, he's able to take advantage and get all kinds of scholarships and everything to make sure that he's able to stay on the course of what he wants to do in life. But the reason why I'm glad that this information came out in the way that he did is because it seems, interestingly enough, that whenever you have a Black person as a victim, it's like they start looking for the most, menacing, cold picture that they can dig up, and you start finding all the dirt to somehow, on some level, just justify all the bullshit that they just went through, right? And so now in this situation, it looks like you cannot do that here. You got a kid who's in the marching band, a kid who's college bound, a kid who's an honors student, right? And for me, like, this, it just really resonates so much because because he's a music student in the marching band. So I'm able to look back and see myself in this kid. And I don't know, the neighborhood that he ended up in, and going to get his siblings. I don't know if it's a really nice neighborhood or not, or whatever. Like, it doesn't even really matter. I just can see, number one, how easy it would be to make the mistake that he made, and I just see myself in this kid, and it just, like, you really have to continue to look at the good in people and look at the good that's going on, because for all of these stories that we hear that just break your heart, there's still a lot of people doing some wonderful things out there, and we really gotta, all the good people doing wonderful things, keep doing that, right? We gotta somehow balance out all this BS, but it can really bring you down sometimes when you hear about this. And again, like, in talking about this situation, I got emotional because it's upsetting. It hurts, man. It hurts that somebody, again, just going about their life doing something as basic and regular and harmless as picking up your siblings to go home, and you end up getting shot. Like, it just it's hard to accept. It's hard to, it's just hard to accept. So, based on what Andrew Lester has come out and said, it seems that the defense angle is ultimately going to be some sort of use of the castle doctrine, right? And again, we've talked about the castle doctrine before, right? And it is a very important rule that's out there that allows you to use force to, to protect yourself in the home. And that's a valuable right. And I am all for someone protecting their home. Do not get me wrong at all. I don't personally have a gun. um, might consider at this point, right? But I'm all for, you have a gun properly, locked away in a safe place, not accessible to kids. And if somebody breaks into your home, you definitely should have the right to use that firearm to protect you and yours. You absolutely should. Um, but yeah, Warren, that's it. That's exactly what I said, Um and I'm about to talk about the law and how that might protect him. But yeah, answering the door with a gun, I think that for you to do that, um you're in a very unfortunate mindset, to think that just by hearing the doorbell, because it wasn't even a knock, it was just I heard the doorbell, I grabbed my gun, right? That just really seems, it seems a lot. Yeah. Um, all about, you having your second amendment right, to carry firearms, and a right to protect your home. But this is that situation, going too far. But yeah, you're out, under the castle doctrine, you are allowed to use reasonable force, including use of a firearm, in order to protect yourself from an intruder in your house. And so, and there's no duty to retreat, right? Under the castle doctrine, there's no duty to retreat. And specifically, because we're in Kansas City in this case, and we're talking about Missouri. So Missouri's self-defense law. And specifically, basically it says that, you can use deadly force, if you reasonably believe that such deadly force is necessary to protect yourself against death, serious physical injury, or any forcible injury or any forcible felony, right? So if you feel like you are in danger of death, serious physical injury, or any forcible felony, then you can respond with deadly force. And this actually extends to the home as well. So under Missouri law, because every state is different, not every state has the same laws on this topic, but under Missouri law, you can use force specifically to repel a burglary and unlawful entry into your house, right? And so even under this law, which seems to be very self-defense friendly, right? Even under Missouri's law, like, in order for you to act in self-defense, there has to be a reasonable belief, right? So it's not just a belief like, oh man, I thought, I felt like I was in fear for my life. I was, in danger. So I just started shooting. Like, no, that belief. So there's an objective element, and then there's a subjective element, right? Because it's going to be your belief, right? So that's the subjective part. But the objective part is it reasonable, right? Would a reasonable, prudent person, an everyday person, look at that situation and say, okay, well, yeah, your belief is reasonable, that you are physically in danger, or somebody's trying to break into your home in this situation. And for me, like, listen, I don't care if it was Debo himself, right? And our RIP to Tiny Lister, but Debo shows at your door, right? Because this kid was like 5'8", 140. And again, another way that I just relate with this kid, that's probably about the size I was in high school when I was 16 years old, right? But you have a very large individual ring your doorbell. Like, ringing your doorbell in and of itself is not going to give you some sort of legal justification to say, hey, I feared for my safety and I just had to shoot him, so that's why I shot. It just doesn't work that way. He's going to have a very difficult position being able to, use that as a defense. And so, again, I think that's where him saying that, that Ralph tried to open the door, that's going to be, like, his big thing. But even that, like, that's just not convincing, because number one, Ralph said he did not, right? He did not try and open the door. But even if he did, he didn't manage to open the door, right? Ralph never actually made it into his house or anything like that. And Lester, basically just started shooting through the glass door, right? And so, based on what we know, and again, he has all of his rights, right? So he has all of his constitutional rights. He's innocent until he's proven guilty. We definitely should wait until this whole thing plays out. But based on what we know at this point, there just doesn't seem to be any imminent threat of death or bodily harm whatsoever. And so, I just don't see how he avoids a conviction in this case. And, lest you foolishly believe that I'm just, coming at this case with this energy, that if you think I'm coming at this case with this energy because Lester is white, like, no, it's not. Like, give me a lot more credit than that. When I was talking about the Nipsey Hussle case, right? When I was talking about Nipsey Hussle, and I said, hey, if Eric Holder and his counsel are going with the defense that, he was acting in the heat of the moment to try and get like some sort of voluntary manslaughter or get something that was not murder, I said, that's not going to work, right? There's no way that this defense has any chance at working. And I said that early on. And the reason why was because, they tried to go with this heat of passion defense. I said, there's two reasons why this is not going to work. Again, we're talking about the Nipsey Hussle, Eric Holder situation. I said it's not going to work because, number one, there was not sufficient provocation, right? So they were trying to say that, Nipsey Hussle provoked this guy by, calling him a snitch or saying that, there's word going around that you're snitching or whatever. Like, that is not sufficient provocation, number one. The talk about snitch is not sufficient provocation. And number two, even if it was, there's a cooling off period that applies, right? So he, after he, allegedly was called a snitch, then, he left the scene, he had his gun, he ate some chili cheese fries, went back to the scene, and, it was minutes. It was like 9 minutes later from the time that the word was said to the time he shot. And that's just way too much time. Like, even if you were provoked, which again, that was not it just was not sufficient provocation. But even if it were, 9 minutes is just way too long for you to say, oh, I was still under, the haze of being, just so provoked. I was in this rage. I was in this, this rage, and I couldn't control myself. And that's why I shot this guy. Like, that wasn't going to work. And so in this situation, I'm just not seeing what facts could possibly come to light based on what we know at this point that's going to ultimately save him. And so it really is a difficult situation. And honestly, I think that if everything plays out the way it seems to be at this point, and again, and this does go to show that I believe in, in everybody having a constitutional right. I believe he has a right to a defense. I believe he has a right to the best defense that, that he can get or that he can afford. And that ultimately that lawyer should go through the evidence and do everything that they can to make sure that his constitutional rights are protected and that he gets treated fairly within the system. But sometimes when you do all of that, in certain situations, your client is still going to get convicted. And in a situation like this, they could end up spending the rest of their life in prison. And I think that's going to be what ends up happening. And I think that's, based on what I know, what is going to be appropriate. If new information emerges that changes my position, I'm more than happy to change my position. I'm not locked into some sort of position. But, based on this information, I just don't see it. I think that whatever he's trying to do with trying to say that he was in fear for his safety, I just do not think that is a reasonable position whatsoever, given the circumstances. And so, that's it. This is a tragic situation, and I certainly, again, wish Ralph Yarl the best, and his family. Again, I can't imagine what his family has been going through, having to deal with this situation. It is quite unfortunate. So I'll take questions. If anybody has questions, kind of unpacked quite a bit. We talked about Alec Baldwin. We talked about the Apple AirTag case out of San Antonio, Texas, and we got to this Ralph Yarl situation. And there is he's got civil lawyers involved. So they're going to get him taken care of, financially. There's just going to be a need. There's going to be medical bills that were involved because he did go to the hospital for a few days. He'll probably have ongoing, treatment that he's going to need. Um, there's going to be he's going to need probably a psychologist or a therapist to see routinely for who knows how long. And there's, an element of pain and suffering, right? So as part of a personal injury claim, you are allowed to receive compensation for, the fright involved, the shock and horror that you're allowed to receive for, the modification of your life, the way your, activities of daily living, they say, the way those were affected. Man, if you get shot in the head and the arm, if it was in the arm, your dominant arm, you might not be able to brush your teeth as well, and bathe, and all these things. I mean, he plays the clarinet, he might not be able to play clarinet for a while. Pressure, because when you're blowing into an instrument, there's a certain element of pressure. He might not be able to play his instrument for years, so he's missing out on enjoyment of life as a result of this incident, and he deserves to be compensated for that. So that's going to be another element of what goes on here. But yeah, we'll take some questions if there are any. Let's look at Sergio Lopez. If you're still here, let's see. How many cases get dismissed in El Paso, Texas? I had a felony charge and I'm kind of scared on my first court date. How long does the court take? So I don't know anything about I don't know anything about El Paso, Texas, man. But what I will say is, first of all, I'm sorry that you're going through this case. I definitely hope that everything works out for you. But um, if you don't already have a lawyer, I would say, reach out to a few. It'd definitely be worth it to Google best criminal defense attorney in El Paso, Texas. Most criminal defense attorneys will offer a free initial consultation. Book a consultation with a few different lawyers, and they should be able to, you'll be able to give them the facts of the case and be able to tell them, what your concerns are, right? So you're facing a felony charge. There's all kinds of different ways that might be able to, affect your life, whether it's you want to, go to school. You look a little young from your profile pic, but if you want to go to school and, to get financial aid because the cost of education is through the roof. Most people need financial aid, but if you have a felony on your record, that might affect your ability to get financial aid. Having a felony on your record might affect your ability to get into the school that you want. Having a felony on your record could affect your ability to get certain jobs, right? Having a felony on your record could affect your ability to get housing. I talk about this stuff all the time. Again, I don't mean like government housing or Section 8 housing. I just mean, hey, I want to apply to live in this apartment complex or to rent this house. If they do a background check, they see a felony on your record. Even though in most states you're not supposed to discriminate on this basis, but just boom, human element, right? If you have two similarly situated candidates, one has a felony on their record, one doesn't, the natural thing is going to be to go with the person who doesn't have a felony on their record, right? So there's a lot of different ways that a felony could affect your life. And so if this is your first case, right, if you have no criminal history, then, a lot of times the prosecutor is not really wanting to, hit somebody with a felony, right? So a lot of ways that can sometimes be negotiated depending on the severity of the action, the action involved, of severity of the allegations, right? Um, So if you're able to go through with your lawyer and talk about the facts of the case, they can then, based on your position, form a defense strategy in order to, put you in the best possible position to avoid a felony or ending up on your record, right? To help you avoid jail time, help you avoid prison time, and help you avoid that felony conviction. In some situations, a case can be reduced to a misdemeanor. In some situations, you enter a guilty plea, and then if you don't have any same or similar incidents within 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, they can dismiss the case. Or, if you have a straight up defense, depending on what the facts of the case are, if you have a straight up defense, then sometimes, you can get the case dismissed, right? With us personally, we get people who are arrested on felony charges. They're awaiting their court date, and we get started immediately with our investigator. We get our investigator going out, shooting pictures, shooting video, interviewing witnesses, interviewing whoever we need to have interviewed, going out and getting surveillance video from local businesses if that's necessary. Basically gathering everything that we can to ultimately get that information to the DA to try and get them to not file charges. So there's a lot of things that you can do in order to protect yourself in this situation. But on the first court date, the vast majority of the time is going to be just the wait time to wait for your case to get called. But generally speaking, on arraignment, it's going to be relatively quick, right? So you're not going to be in front of the judge that long. All you're doing is entering your not guilty plea. So you're going to enter your not guilty plea, deny the allegations, and your lawyer is going to do that on your behalf. It's not something that you're going to have to be responsible for. You're really not going to have to say much at all at that first court date. So you're going to enter the not guilty plea, and then the judge will discuss bail, right? So if there's any bail conditions that need to be discussed, or bail needs to be raised or lowered, depending on the situation. So you definitely want to supply your lawyer with all the positive information that you can so that they can make the argument that your bail should be lowered, or you should be able to be released on your own recognizance, or, so getting letters of support, getting proof of employment, getting, any positive information that they can. Those things are going to be ideal in that situation. So I think I answered your question. But yeah, so go out, get your lawyer as soon as you can. That's going to be the best thing. And Darcy, did the older man talk to the police, or did he have counsel right away? I'm not certain, but I do know that he spoke to the police relatively soon in the situation. He was detained based on reports. He was only detained for about 2 hours of questioning, and then they released him. So, and that's what caused, all the outrage, because, he shot a little boy. So let's not make this kid older than he is, because there's also that tendency to, somehow make black kids, into men prematurely. He was 16-year-old. That's a kid to me, man. Even when you're 20, 25, now maybe not 25, but 20 years old, you're still a kid, right? To me. But yeah, he gave his statement, and after 2 hours they let him go. And that was, what just had people so upset. Like, how is it that he was able to shoot this kid in the head and get out of jail, or not get arrested, right? Had a lot of people upset, and naturally so. So let's see. If we have any more questions, I'm definitely willing to answer those. Any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas for the next live stream? Warren, I appreciate it. Just wanted to say thanks for making these videos. I'm in law school now, and I found them very interesting, really interesting and inspiring. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. We've been in contact in these digital streets for quite some time, so I definitely appreciate you supporting the channel. I actually had someone inbox me from I don't remember, somewhere across the world. It was like, man, you really inspire me. You're an amazing role model. And he just started law school too. So I think, man, that is such a beautiful thing that we can have, impact just by living life, man. And I think, again, amongst all the negativity out there, amongst, just all the BS that's going on, it's nice to just have good people trying to do good things in the world, and be inspiring and all of that. Like I drew inspiration from a bunch of people over the years, and have gotten a lot of help over the years, and any way that I can, give back, I try and do so. And so by being able to educate people through this means, also just being able to put myself out there, right? Again, like I said, when somebody is in a jam, and they need someone to fight for them, because, just like we had Sergio make that comment, hey, I'm facing my first court date, it is scary, man. It's scary. It's scary, scary, scary. It's you're worried, you're frustrated, you're sad. All these negative emotions come when you are facing criminal charges, especially a felony, especially when you might be facing, multiple years in prison or life. Like, that's a scary prospect, and you definitely um want to find the best attorney that you can to help you get through the situation. And one of the things, it's not just about us, fighting the charges. It's about doing what we can to help, address the very issue that led you to being in the situation that you're in. Assuming that you're not, just straight up innocent. Sometimes, we have a couple of cases right now where, we believe our client did not do at all what they're being alleged to have done. And so there's a different defense approach to that type of situation. But, in a situation where a person actually did what they're being charged with, you definitely want to get to the root of what led to the person doing what they're being charged with, and without judgment. I think that's really important too, right? Because sometimes when I'm speaking on some of these stories, sometimes we laugh a little bit and joke and all these different type of things. But when somebody comes through and, it could be something that's very embarrassing, right? And the last thing that you want is to have, somebody who's supposed to be a professional making you feel embarrassed about what you did or judging you about what you did. And I've represented some people who've done some very ugly things over the years. And, I'd like to think that none of them ever felt like they were being judged about their situation. They were treated professionally, they were treated respectfully. And I don't care, what your walk of life is, what you do for a living, right? We're going to treat you right, right? Everybody should be treated like the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, right? Everybody should be treated with respect. Everybody should be treated, like we truly care for them, because we do. And we're continuing to have a solid impact on people. I'm just so pleased with the reviews that are coming along and all of that really really touches my heart, that as we expand and attempt to continue to deliver solid results, that we're getting the feedback from it. And we're adding to the team. I'm excited that we have a couple of new people starting. Like one, Marina just started last week. She's in a little training period. We have Marissa starting tomorrow as a new paralegal. So new paralegal, receptionist, or new paralegal and a new receptionist, joining the team. So Kersey Law is growing, right? Again, I know everybody sees me, but but we're growing, we're expanding. There's no way I could do everything that that Kersey Law does by myself. There's a whole team behind me that helps us do what we do. And so I definitely want to say, I'm sure none of them are watching this, but I definitely want to put out the thanks, because I'm certainly grateful to all of the team, and I'm grateful to all of you. You guys consistently, tag me on social media, recommend people to me, whether it's your coworkers, friends, loved ones, significant others, consistently sending people our way, and we definitely appreciate that. So thank you so much. So it doesn't look like there are any more questions on here, so we're about to close this thing out. Yeah, man, I'm trying to be more consistent with the lives, man, so I can get better, man. This is still this is still very much a challenge for me, man. I'm again, pretty set on the legal side of things. Know my way in and out of a courtroom. I've been presenting cases to juries for a long time now. But we're trying to continue to up the skills on this social media thing, this video live streaming, all this kind of stuff. Next topic, I don't know, BJ. I don't know what the next topic is. I have a few things. I do want to talk about this Jonathan Majors story. So that's pretty interesting. A lot of people, it's a common situation. He's lost a lot, right? Army pulled out on the advertising campaign that they had with him. His His PR team is gone. His management team is gone. There's going to be a lot of roles that he loses out on because of this situation. And so, most people, right? Most people are not public figures in that sense and don't have their cases on display for the world to see. But a lot of people, when they do get arrested, for a domestic violence situation or something like that, they can lose their job. They can lose their job or be at risk of losing their job. And again, it's not the same as having news headlines printed about you and you losing, movie deals and all that kind of stuff, but it's just as meaningful to you, right? If you got a good job at, at a car wash or at a bank or at a restaurant or wherever in the military, you don't want to lose that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that case. That's one. There's there's always something out there. Designer, the rapper Designer, basically got caught exposing himself on a plane. Might need to get to that one. There's a bunch of stuff out there, but I'm always open to topics. If somebody wants to, put something out there, we'll get to it. But I think that's going to be it because I got to get to bed soon. We got court in the morning on a big case. So if you made it all the way to the end, man, I definitely want to appreciate you. Thanks so much for rocking with me. Thank you so much for the support ongoing. I hope I hope you got something out of this and it was worthwhile and interesting to you. And if you did, please, for the algorithm, show me some love, hit the like button or the heart button, whichever one of those. Just don't give me the thumbs down. Don't do that to me. For the algorithm, shoot me a like. Appreciate it. All right, BJ, appreciate you. Thanks so much. And we are out. Have a good night. We'll talk to you soon. Till next time. Peace.